Hello, hi everybody. I'm Charlie Osmond, the Chief Tease at Triptease. Thank you very much for joining us for this webinar. We have Calvin Anderson from Red Lion Hotels, who's going to talk us through three of his favorite charts in the world of revenue management. We're delighted to have Calvin join us. Hello.
Hey, hello everyone.
Maybe I should let you introduce yourself, how you got to Red Lion, what you were doing before, and why it is you love data and charts in your role.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, Charlie. I've been at Red Lion almost a year and a half now, out in Denver, Colorado. I can't really remember life before. Before that, and at Red Lion, I oversee global sales, our media marketing, so kind of your direct response marketing, the customer acquisition element, and revenue strategy and business intelligence. And kind of a commercial role. And before that, I was with Duetto Research, which is a great RMS company, and I had the pleasure of really starting their managed services, which is their revenue management and commercial consulting arm. So I did that for a little over 2 years, and before that, I was the director of revenue at the New York Hilton in New York City, which is a 2,100 room, big girl for Hilton.
Great.
Yeah.
So I was going to say, so lots of experience at looking at not only Red Lion property hotels, but also a variety of others when you were at Duetto, going in, looking at people's numbers and trying to help them understand different, better ways to think about revenue management. And that's one of the reasons why we were so keen to get you for a webinar to talk about how you approach revenue management challenges, and particularly what kind of charts you love. And the other reason for that was we were very lucky to have you speak at the Direct Booking Summit earlier this year. And you gave an absolutely fantastic keynote that so many people said was the highlight of the event. And so we were really keen to just kind of like bring a little bit of that to a wider audience. And one of the things you said was that you spent the weekend once teaching yourself how to use Tableau to be able to look at data better. And so I thought we'd love to just hear from you. What are the kind of charts you put through that system? Why do you love it? And what value do you get from them? So
yeah, absolutely. Actually, with plural weekends, but yeah, no, I just one of the challenges, and I'm sure all of you know that are in revenue management or anything commercial, sales or marketing, is that there is so much data out there, and I think we have a super cliche like data. What's the cliche line? Data overload or some monkey business like that. But data blur. But it's that we need to be able to see things fast and execute. So from a property level, director of revenue, all the way up to a very corporate level, no matter what happens, you need someone being able to make faster, smarter decisions than everyone else. And the data is, I would say, kind of like crumpled up and goodbye and dead within 4, 5, 6 hours probably. And so you need to be pivoting with that. And so I needed, as a director of revenue, the ability to have a lot of visibility to make fast and smarter decisions more quickly, especially once we went into that consulting role with Duetto, where you're bouncing back and forth between tons of hotels, tons of portfolios. I had to be able to walk in and bring value immediately to an ownership group or a management company and show them stuff that was very aha for them. And the only way for me really to do that was to be able to move quickly through data. And so I started venturing into Tableau because I heard that it was a really good visualizer. And it's cliche also to say, but a picture's worth 1,000 words, and you can really see and do so much more with your data visualized versus text data. And then the other thing I would just add is that Excel has like 1,350,000 lines, and then you're bunk. And that, if you have more than 10 rooms in your hotel and want to look at more than one perspective, and you're looking at raw data, you run out of lines really quick. And that's not a world that we're going into in the future, and it's not a world we're in today.
Okay, cool. So you found a love for Tableau, and you were going to talk us through some charts that you love to look at.
Yeah. Great. I'll just add that I'm not trying to just sell Tableau as much as see, and I think it's I think one of the easiest and best to use at the moment. Let's see. I'm trying to hit the share screen button.
Okay, back. Yep, got the screen. I said, oh no, I had it and now it's gone.
Okay. Are you looking at a Tableau workbook?
A minute
No?
ago I was.
Okay.
5 seconds ago.
Oh, all right. I think let's try this. We practiced this
Yes,
before,
yes,
guys. So
perfect.
yeah,
There.
okay.
We have the charts.
Like a slow learner over here. Okay, great. So let's take a look at what we've got here. We've got Redline Hotel Surprise. But this is real data. And you've got a little bit of a key on the bottom right-hand side of the screen where we're looking at basic market segmentation. And so I kind of have this philosophy that I think that looking through the lens of market segmentation is sort of hilarious. You see I've got the dark blue discount color here, which is hilarious. Like, what's in discount? It's a lot of things wrapped up. And the problem is that we have to lump things into buckets, and there's 5 or 6 strategies probably that flow into that discount. And even at Red Lion, being such a baller here, I still can't change our financial P&L segmentation. We've had to keep market segmentation the way it is. And so that's a restraint I'm stuck with, but I'll show you some ways around that. And you most likely are going to have in your PMS, in your CRS, every rate code is going to be assigned a market segment. It hopefully is assigned a channel as well, so it's in it. And then of course you have a rate code. So you kind of have 3 levels of depth to go through. And instead of maybe deciding to look at everything through rate code, which would be absolutely impossible to gather value out of a view like that, the idea would be to kind of flow in between those perspectives. So what we're looking at here is a single hotel. On the bottom line, you have your running on the books revenue. So the bars are heighted by revenue, and you can perhaps see the weeks down here at the bottom. So at the beginning, you've got week 21 and then week 41, which is really week 40 is the last stay week of 7-day period of the month of September. So we're looking at this hotel for the stay dates of the month of September, but what you're looking at are 7-day slices of booking dates and running booking dates. So in week 33, this hotel had $140,000 of business. At the end of week 34, it had $180,000 of business. And so you can see, of course, that if the last booking week is week 40 of the stay month of September, that you've got the last 4 weeks on this chart here. Let me just scroll over so you are not distracted by week 41, where if one cancellation registers, you're going to see that change. So if your GM goes back and makes a change and comps a room, that's going to show up, and it could show up in week 50 if you want. And what's interesting about data is that you could say that makes no sense. There's only 40 weeks in September, and the reality is no, your data did something weird, and now you can see it. Anyhow, so that's your running on the books. It's colored by ADR. So I would say green is good like money, red is bad like the devil. I'm kind of like a slow thinker, so I need to have a consistent understanding of every single worksheet I look at. So any page, if I'm the revenue manager and it's red, I don't like it, and if it's green, it's good. So what you may notice here at week 19, we're in kind of a slimy, swampy green that starts to yellow a little bit. And then week 24, we immediately jump to kind of a, an autumn tomato very quickly, right? And then it slumps into a little bit lighter orange here by the time we get to really the middle of August. And then we walk into the beginning of September here on week 35. And it gets, or the last week of August, and it gets quite red and goes maybe a little bit lighter. And if you were to follow the lines, you can see that we went from $92 to a final period here, which is $82 in ADR. That's my running ADR, my running room nights, and my running revenue. And so what that immediately tells me is that I've got a month here that decreases in ADR as I go into arrival. What I have on the top is what picked up each of those 7 days, highlighted by, of course, the color of its segment. And so, for example, you can see OTA in this case is red, kind of like a little jab, right? Just give them that fun color here, just because we're so emotionally used to beating up those poor guys. And you can see that outside of any other colors, there's a little bit of yellow, which is contract. So it might be like a permanent contract that just shows up in one block on your PMS. But really, the only player that's really producing much outside of 4, 5, or 6 weeks is OTA. There's little slivers of other smaller segments. You can see NQR, which is our non-qualified retail rate, really only materially shows up here in week 34 at 88 rooms. and then it flows in. So what I can see here is not only basically how my month comes to be, but I can also see how it materializes by segment and how those segments drive that. So the reason, of course, we go from swamp green to autumn tomato here, I'm going to use that later, in week 24 is probably because of this huge block of yellow perm or contract business, which came in at the unhappy ADR of $64, which was about $30 less than our $91 ADR that was on the books prior, right? So that's basically the narrative of how my month happened, right? I also can see where the biggest flow of rooms comes in. So the biggest booking week for me in this month is week 35, which is the last week of August for the stay month of September, right? The thing that you may look at here, though, is you can see I've got my group and my contract. That is not really a byproduct of market demand or a byproduct of my pricing, probably, right? I mean, it's not really like my ongoing retail pricing. And so this is my narrative. But if I'm trying to look at this data, I mean, oftentimes my team says, what report should I look at? What are your top favorite 4 or 5? And I always say that's a terrible question. And I don't say it like that angrily on the inside because I want to keep retention moderately high. But I say, like, you got to think about the question you're trying to ask and what am I trying to impact. At the conference, I said that there are 2 kinds of reports. One is roll-up, or 2 ways to use big data. One's roll-up reporting, and the other is drill-down analytics. And roll-up reporting is to tell you how you're doing, but it is not to tell you what to do with that shit, right? And so the drill-down analytics, my goal here is to impact how my month works, or what could I have done better, or what could I do better in future months. So in this case, I'm probably, as a director of revenue, looking at this going, I want to impact my transient strategy, because group sort of is what it is in this period in a lot of cases. And so what I'm going to do here is I'm going to go into, I have all these filters on the side, and I'm going to quickly roll out my group and contract segments. And now I'm only looking at my transient segments. And so we've got a whole different narrative. So if you remember,
that was a special moment.
Right. I'm glad that, yeah, special moments are what life is about. With love from the Triptease. Did you smile like when you said that? Like, is that, are you like, why did I name myself that at some point? I'm just saying that. It's kind of a conversation starter. Yeah, I know. Yeah, I want a dirty martini and to hear how that happened.
Wait, I mean, okay, I don't want to take you off track.
Yes, yeah, well, that was my fault. Yeah. Okay, anyway, so we're back to this. And so now we have a different narrative on the bottom. Run, we never get to red here, right? And the reason we never get to red is because we're no longer looking at our permanent contract, which had us at that $64 ADR. And obviously, some of that group was probably hurting us as well, which is the group maybe was base filling, but it was not ADR driving. So now we're looking at a much darker green until week 31. So that really would be July. And then at about week 31, you start to see a pretty incremental pickup as we head into our August booking window. And that's where we start to see movement. But nonetheless, we still end up washing off from, the beginning of the summer. We had a $100 ADR on the books, and we shave off $14 by the time we get to the end of the month. Also, we see, that group really pile onto week 36 and week 35. And what we really see is week 36, which is the first booking week of September, really is the largest, most important booking week. And you can also see it almost like looking at veins in a rock. And you can see corporate here really shows up really big here in that window. And maybe your corporate accounts are a static set of rates that are not really a byproduct of your transient strategy because they have a set rate. So it's nice to know where they show up so that I understand how I'm looking at my pickup, but I'm going to remove that guy out of here in order to see now how do things look. So this is more of a byproduct of my transient strategy, which is my retail or my bar rate, my discounts, which are more like my qualified AAA rates or employee rates. And then I've got promotions, which are brand promotions or promotions that I may have run internally. And then I've got government, which is, I would argue, more of a transient rate unless you have a really permanent government rate, and then OTA. And so now I have, again, slightly a different narrative where absolutely all the bookings are coming in the month for the month. OTA continues to drive into it. But my retail window, which really are my brand direct, which are all my blues and greens in this case that don't have that heavy third-party commission on it really show up in the month for the month. And so again, I can see this value, I can see where it works, and that is going to impact my pricing. So if you're a branded hotel where you're really locked into a parity world where you can't do things differently, you might, your rate kind of is your rate, and you would know what I would say in this case is, I know that what I don't want to do is trade down my high dollar retail rate. So here is a $112 ADR on bar versus a $74 OTA rate here, right? So I'd much rather get this. And so what I'm looking to do as a revenue manager is not to trade down these premium channels that come at low cost of acquisition and higher ADRs. And so if I'm looking at this, I would say, how do I make sure that happens, and how do I protect that? And so then I would say, let's make sure that we're avoiding that 6-week window and run our biggest, best deals way out here, where I'm not interrupting a traditional transient strategy or retail or brand direct strategy, and then be much more protective here. And then the other question would be, well, what rate can you afford to charge out there, right? So out here, we are picking up in the $100 range, right? So I've got $100 ADRs picking up, where by the time I get to the last week, I'm in the $80 range, right? And so maybe out here, your comp set is selling at a rate that is, you know, let's just say if you're selling netting rates at $100, maybe you're selling at 120, and your comp set may be priced at 150, but you know that your last 2 or 3 weeks are going to be netting rates in the $80 range. Perhaps you're better off undercutting your comp set further out here, being the best value in the market, and yet knowing that strategy, as long as I'm netting rates higher than $80 and driving more volume through that, I'm probably in a better position than dropping trowel last minute here and then hurting and hindering my direct and retail strategy. So that is kind of that's a way to look at just your basic on the books data that can give you some pretty quick insights. So let's take this goofy ass slow, I mean, this is my ABCs report, and have a little fun with it with the filters. So the first thing you should know is that every reservation has about 6 statuses depending on the PMS, which are canceled, checked in, checked out, day canceled, and no-show, and reserved. And so, for example, this is what I'm netting, but this isn't exactly what I'm actually booking. And so what I really ought to do if I want to understand the market value is I should say, let's see what checked in, checked out, and reserved in that window here. Wait for it, wait for it.
And while we wait, I'm just going to say it is possible to ask questions, and do that. We will refer to them in the meet. Oh well, it's popped up. I'll come back with questions when.
Okay, great. Yes, I'll just go. Again, here we're looking at the same thing we're looking at, and what you notice is we see way less yellow here, which means that actually the market demand is carrying ADRs. If you remember, our last ADRs in the OTA range were. Or the total range were around the 80s, where now they're creeping much closer to the 90s. So what that oddly means is we were somehow canceling lower rated business. And so what I could have looked at is said that this market is really dramatically decompressing, when in reality, it's only slightly decompressing. It's certainly not selling $100 rates necessarily the whole way out. But when I only look at what reserved, that's really what I should be pricing to, as opposed to pricing to what I'm netting. And so we could then flip the charts quickly and see what had canceled. A day canceled is a shortened reservation. And then a no-show, obviously, is a bad front desk not doing their job, basically. Wait for it. Okay, so negatives are below the line. How do you like that, monkey business? So here I've got a situation where I can kind of see what's canceling off. What's interesting is the cancellations are getting, you can see the cancellations are going into a darker green, which means I'm canceling higher and higher rated business as well. So that would be something that I basically made an assumption that I told you that I would argue I maybe should not have made so quickly, which we make tons of assumptions in revenue management. And oftentimes we're trying to fix things that we probably shouldn't be trying to fix, which is a problem. So anyways, so this is just, I mean, there's just so much flexibility within one world. And so that is, you know, just a way to look at what's on the books. And I'll take us to the next chart, unless I'll pause for a second.
Yeah, and just before we do, I have questions to make sure I'm keeping up
Yeah.
and understanding. Um, so I imagine, so it was a really interesting look at the lead up, and a whole bunch of hypotheses then jump out at you from doing that. But I imagine, one of the challenges is, as you look at any particular 1 week's worth of bookings, that there could have been 50 other things that were going on that led to the ADR changing, competitive rates. And so how do you like piece together all those different things that may or may not be in this chart that you're looking at, as you'll and not get to the point where you get to the end of the day, you go, I've looked at like 20 charts. I think I had some hypotheses, but now there's so much confusion in my head. I don't actually know what the conclusion is.
So I think that it's almost like reading a book, and you have to remember the narrative of your hotel, right? And so we're looking at a hotel for the first time, right? But when you go through a little bit of the process of discovery in looking at a report, hopefully you're not forgetting it the next day. So what I'm going to do is, if I make an assumption and I'd say, wow, I thought that, how did I get darker green according to what picked up, and yet darker green as I canceled, which means, it's just, I would need to dig into a few things, but I'm going to remember what that was. And then I'm going to have to, and then when I look at the stuff the next day, I'm answering the next chapter. I'm not reading the whole book again. I'm just, reading to the next chapter. And so it kind of becomes a thing where, and for me, I have a terrible memory. And so I need to have it kind of burned into me. So I remember well when I see pictures, and I remember well when I had to go through an experience to gain kind of that thought. So that's the best way I could say, which is like continued a narrative. Let me take us back to, so now we're looking at pace basically. So initially we were just looking at this top chart, and I'm not going to put back in corporate, or, well, maybe I'll put back corporate, but I'm not going to put back all the group segments here. So we in revenue management have always looked at pace reports, right? It's what do I have on the books today versus same time last year, and then we look at like pickup pace, which is how much did I pick up the same 7 days last year versus the same 7 days this year. And the questions we're trying to answer when we look at pace is, how am I positioned, right? And do I like that or not? But if you were to change your revenue strategy based on your running pace, you would be forgetting the notion that all of that is in the books, on the books today, that took a year to get there, right? And so when we look at pickup pace, the question we're trying to answer is, how do I impact according to market conditions that are live today? Because you don't want to change your strategy based on stuff that market conditions that have expired, if that makes any sense. So here, we're going to look, and I'll just kind of point out what you're looking at when you're looking at an Excel-based pace report. So say you're in the booking with your weekly revenue call on Wednesday in week 39, which is basically the last full booking week of September. You are sitting here and you're going, I have 358K on, well, I really should move us back. Let's say week 34, I have 131K on the books versus 123 last year. So I'm pleased to be up, $7,000 or $8,000. I'm $88 down in ADR, but I have more room. So not loving it, not hating it. Nobody's getting a gold star yet, maybe a silver star, depending on how this plane lands, right? And so what happens, and then we go, let's look at our pickup pace. And so we look at the pickup pace for that week, which was 27,808 at so $83 ADR and 27K, versus same time last year was 94K or 23,000 at a $94 ADR. So not only on the books do we have more revenue and less ADR, we are perpetuating that pattern in our pickup, which is we are picking up more revenue and less ADR. And the question you would want to immediately know is this a sellout month? Do I constantly sell out? That would be a problem if you were selling out most of your days. You might say, I might be going a little bit too aggressive. In the same regard, you may also be going, listen, my month last year ended at an $87 ADR. And so if I can move more rooms now at an ADR that's higher than that, this is 86, you're not really doing that. But if you're moving maybe more rooms at an 88, 89, you might be pleased with that result, even though it was less than last year's pace. And so what happens is when we're looking at pace, if you could kind of imagine putting like rulers on each side of the bars, which is that I'm only looking at the strip of week 34 here. What you're doing is you're saying, I'm basically not going to look at any of my history. So I don't remember how I got here. All I know is exactly where I am today. And then the wonderful thing about historic data is that it's already happened, right? And so you can see that already. And what we do in revenue management with Excel is we say, you know what? I am not going to look at week 35 last year until week 35 happens. It's like a fucking game of peekaboo, man, which is a terrible idea because you've always had the data. And so in a lot of cases, you would be looking at a current month. So let me move us to a month like the month that we're in and give you a little bit more enlightened pattern because we've been looking at months that are over. But I'll just flip us to November. I'm gonna shift this down a little bit. And we'll line these guys up and you can see a better way to look at pace and position for a month that hasn't materialized. This takes a second. There are 170 tabs and 1,400 hotels in this workbook. And so it has to think for just a hot minute.
So the key message here is that if you're doing what most hoteliers do often, which is running in Excel, then you're looking back at how were we this week last year, but you're not also considering and what's likely to happen in the next 2-3 weeks based on last year.
Exactly. So, yep. So for example, here is this hotel for November. Boy, I should have picked one that I'm looking better at, huh? In week 43, you can see that we have 83K at a $93 ADR. Now, week 43 is the week we're in for the year of 2018. So really better pace would be week 42 because we're only into Thursday and I have Friday and Saturday and the rest of today to pick up in this case. And this is actually a little bit older workbook as of the 22nd. So it's we'd really be better off looking at the week 42, which is the completed week as of Saturday versus 111,000. So I'm down here about $30,000. Don't love it, right? In my transient pace, now I could put back the group and contract and that might help me, but I'm just really looking to optimize my transient behavior. And so with pace, what we're often doing is we are only seeing week 42, but we have how the rest of we can read the rest of last year's story. And what happens is it's like reading this year's book and last year's book chapter by chapter when we ought to be just looking at how did last year end? Did last year blow up and do incredible or did shit the bed? And so today we're looking at 93 versus $102 ADR, right? But look how quick this stuff goes from, dark green to yellow and orange last year into almost towards red by our final booking week, which is the 48th week at an $87 ADR. And so if I could do anything to sell more rooms at a faster pace, then I'm going to know I can chase it ahead. It's okay to be behind pace behind an ADR because I'm trying to land this plane right, not just win each week in pace. The other thing that I could see here, so this is like a message of warning for me, right? So you can see that this is not a great week, right? So in week 39, I picked up almost $5 million versus $18 million. Not good, right? Week 40, I picked up 4 million versus 17, or 4,000 versus 17,000, then 11,000 versus 19, and then 9,000 versus 26. And so I have a whole month of poor pickup pace. I'm behind and I'm making my position worse and worse and worse. And I am about to bust into, not this week that we're in, but next week is week 44, which is the most important booking week of the entire month. And all I have is a 5-week history of underperforming. And so if I'm not correcting that in this case, I know that damage is going to get worse. And so what happens if you're not looking at where the future goes, I'm saying, wow, last week I picked up 26,000, I picked up 9,000 last week, I need to double that. When the reality is, no, your ass need to triple that shit and quadruple it to even compete with last year's position.
Got it. So that is a much more sort of holistic way of looking at it. But what would you do? What
I would definitely do next is, just like monthly is roll up of 30 to 31 days, I would then start going into a daily position to find out where I'm performing. So let's go to the next chart in just 3 seconds. And I'll say that quickly, if you remember me at the beginning, I said there's usually market segment, most PMSs have, then channel, and then they have rate code. If I were looking at this before, I could quickly say, how was I selling so much last year? The most obvious answer right here is I was selling a lot of OTA, and I could go to my next tab here, where then I can look through the same data, but through the lens of source in this case, where I've filtered out all market segments except for OTA, and now I'm looking at production by source. And what I can see here is I'm actually doing well in Booking.com, but I'm doing very poorly in Expedia in this case. And then I also need to make sure that Hotwire and Priceline show up last minute. I've not sold much of that, but I got to make sure I have that strategy ready to go if I want to compete. And so I probably don't need to correct in Booking.com. I ought to correct in, in Expedia is really my big problem in this case this week for this hotel. So again, just an incredible ability to go out. So how would I correct that? The first thing I would do is I'd say, let's find out where we're losing our shorts. And don't lose your shorts in a month period, you lose them in a daily period, right? And so let me click on this button. It's gonna take like a minute. Charlie, if you wanna, oh, never mind, we're good. It's gonna make you sing or something. We're safe, don't worry. So this, again, and unfortunately this is a little bit out of date. I masked the data and picked an old workbook just so that in case whoever competes with Redline Surprise figures it out. This would be, this is live as of the 22nd. And so we're right here would be our live date. And what we've got here is basically your star data versus your same time last year, or you could do your comp sets final last year performance. And so again, it goes back to the question of what am I trying to solve for this hotel? So if this hotel is a new hotel that's historically underperformed prior, maybe we took it over as a brand, right? I'm not going to maybe benchmark them against the comp set because the comps, maybe this hotel consistently runs a RevPAR index that's like 80 or 75 and when we got it, right? And so for me to beat that, it's going to be completely impossible. And sometimes if you're shooting for a number that's here, but reality is here, and you're pricing way too high, you're gonna perform here, right? And so I did grasp my arm, isn't that nice? And so again, you would pick what you want to benchmark against. So what we're looking at here is rooms, ADR, and revenue. In yellow on the top, you've got your on the books occupancy or room nights. The red, the Gantt bar, is your same day of week last year performance and data. When you're looking at daily, of course, you always compare day of week. And then when you're looking at monthly, you always compare numerically. And then I've got my variance here. And then the same thing in ADR, which is, again, what I have on the books in the blue bar. The Gantt mark is where I landed the plane last year, and this is my variance. And then finally, revenue. So if I'm looking ahead at November, right? So let's pretend we were looking at that report and we're going, God, what am I gonna do about November? November is really shitting the bed. I'm gonna look at this and say, let's start to look at where my biggest holes are. And so usually you would hope that you can remember how the curve went up and we filled kind of at a semi-even, though there were some, usually the first and second week of the month are the big boys in this case. I wanna see a similar curve down in my pace here. And so if I have a jut that sticks out, then I know I'm vulnerable. And so one of the places I'm most vulnerable here would be November 9th, where last year we had 112 rooms. I have a hearty 28 on the books with an $84 variance. Wait, there's more. A fish scaling knife and a negative $18 ADR, which leaves me with a variance to be booked of $9,988. So $10,000 have to be made up for this hotel to fix it. So this is a week end right here, Friday and Saturday and Sunday, where I am very vulnerable. I have a long ways to go. I have one of my worst divots. I'm down in ADR, and I also am down in revenue. Where by contrast, the week of Halloween here, it very poorly performed last year. But I, in most cases, being 10 days out, already have, in this case, one more room on the books than I had last year already. My ADR variance is there, and so I'm already clocking a fabulous $99 revenue increase on November 1st today, as of the 22nd. And so I have then basically 10 days to not only to basically make up for this guy who may not quite catch up. And so the value in this is it all depends on how your market's been performing. If your market is completely different year over year or month over month, then you maybe would be careful about your comparison here. But if you, in most cases, our markets have similar repetitions. And so I would look at this and say, okay, what do we got to do to save this month and make it happen? If I'm looking at November, I'm looking at this weekend to start, and then I'm looking at the end of November around Thanksgiving, where I have very little layered in, and I have one of my biggest variances to catch up. That would be one perspective. And then the other side of the coin would be, where do I have opportunity to make up for revenue? So here, I may never recover all my room nights and all of my ADR. So I'm going to look at this and say, I for sure have to get the room nights there. I don't have maybe the same weekend situation. So I'm going to kind of let the ADR go, chase the room nights. And what I need to do is way outperform rather than sitting back pretty this Halloween week here, because that's going to be vital to making up for what I can't make up on the weekend, the 8th, 9th, and 10th. So that would be one area that I at least start to navigate for what to do. That's not
okay. That's great. There's a lot to take in there, and this is a hell of a page to study. And I guess, and most people would be looking at this in Excel, and so you can't quite pick out the fluctuations so easily.
Right, and so that's the deal, right? You could definitely get all this in Excel, but you wouldn't probably get it as quickly and say, oh, that's a problem right there with that ADR. I mean, you almost would want to color your Excel numbers to kind of get an idea of where the ups and downs are. So again, it's just, so we do this by forecast, we do it by budget, we do it by comp set, and then we also do it with Demand 360 data, so you can see where they are live for tomorrow as well. So you have just really incredible visibility to that. Why don't we take it to the, okay, yeah. And
this is something you'd be looking at every day if you were there?
Yes, absolutely. Yeah. Depending on what I'm trying to answer, right? Maybe I remember that that's the period, and you know, I might be going somewhere else to find out, have I made a dent in that? We have a report I call the Tetris report, which is new bookings fall onto old bookings like Tetris cubes, and am I filling my hole? One day length of stays are your unicorn yellow or blue bar.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So let's just take that same logic here a little bit, and let's look at, this is a totally different hotel. It's you can kind of see the numbers on the side. This is a Baltimore hotel. This is not as private as data because it's rate shops. So I've got my rate shops colored here, and I keep all of my old rate shops. Should never be throwing that stuff away, and hopefully you have some kind of depository of files on your desktop to an enterprise data warehouse, depending on the size of your company or scope of your work here. But old rate shops are amazing. And so this is a hotel that we used this before we had Demand 360, which is, you know, a wonderful forward-looking tool to tell you how things are going. But there's a couple pieces of value here that you should notice. One is we're looking at occupancy and on the books or market performance on top of rate shops, right? So I'm like everybody's favorite guy at conference, especially if you're a rate shop company, because they're like, oh, look at all these 20 rate shop dashboards. And I'm like, oh, like I would not buy your product because I literally don't want my team to spend time looking at 20 only rate shop reports. What we need is rate shop on top of booking data on top of market performance, so that I can see the whole narrative versus looking at 9 screens and trying to hobble together on the back of a napkin what I need to do, right? And so, yeah. Short their stocks. I'm kidding. No, I just
but
that's right.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, it's just a challenge, right? That like it's a very one-dimensional picture and strategy, and so it's a dangerous place to just be. And I know for me, I'm constantly thinking about, and you should be thinking about this for yourself. What is the investment of my time in order to get the best return? I literally, my revenue management tagline, it's very esoterical. It's what am I doing right now that actually helps us make money? Right? And so if I'm not deriving strategies that pivot change, if I'm writing reports, if I'm forecasting reports and telling you how much I'm going to lose, you're out. I mean, it's just a terrible way to spend your time. And so what I'm looking at here is colored competitors for this day's rate shops. This is October 23rd in this case, versus the same day of week, or October 22nd, last year's one day ahead by calendar date. And so I'm looking at the same rate shop I had for this hotel, which you can see we've added some to this hotel, red for the red lion. I'm basically like a color genius, right? And then we've got it heighted by ADR on top of market performance last year by same day of week. So you could do Demand 360 data for forward-looking data if you have that for the hotel, or we all have tons of unlooked at star reports, right? And so this is a great way to actually kind of predict the future with only historic data. So what I'm looking for here in the market sense, tall bars are high ADR and darker bars are fuller occupancy. So tall, dark, and handsome bars are what we're looking at here, right? And if they are, so that's how the market performed. And obviously, when you've got a retail rate that you're shopping, you would expect to net probably a little bit less than that retail rate you're getting. But there's no doubt that the your on the books occupancy and pickup is a byproduct of your pricing, right? And so,
and wait a second, sorry, I'm just going to make sure I'm following on. So the bars, the tall, dark, and handsome bars you're looking for, those are market results, not the hotels.
Right. So last day, I mean, in the tooltip, I have the comp and the property. So I like to hide a ton of data in the tooltip. And what rule I use is anything in blue for my team is what I want you to pay attention to. So in this case, I'm paying your attention to $173 ADR and a 99% occupancy on this day. And so that's what it performed, not by numeric date, but by day of week last year, right? And so if I know that the market sold out at $173 ADR and sold out, and so we were not quite sold out, right? But the comp set did, so the market's there. And now you can see how all of the comp is priced except for two hotels. Monaco and Sheraton are a little high apple pie. We've got like 6 or 7 hotels that range from $98 to $153. So let's predict a little future here, Charlie. Do you think the market is going to produce the same thing this year as it did last year?
On November the 7th?
On the 7th, you got it, yep.
Oh, let me make sure I'm understanding.
Oh my God, yeah, you didn't know I can do this to you, right?
Put me on the, you put me on the spot. It's good, it's good. Okay.
I like it.
So wait a sec.
So you've got a market that's sold out at $173 ADR.
Yeah.
We are, today in this case is October 22nd. So we've got about 2 weeks to get there. And all these guys, probably 2/3 of your hotels are priced from $153 retail to $98. Do you think that market is going to sell out at a $173 ADR this year?
Wait a second, sorry, then there's something I've misunderstood. You're looking at 2018 data, but you're
correct on the top. On the bottom is 2017. Sorry.
Okay, so wait a second. So the 2018 data that we're looking at for November the 7th, you're saying that's last year in our quiz?
Correct. Yep. So the market performed what I'm highlighting last year, like that. Sorry. But the pricing is live this year.
And the pricing that's live is the current one, the 98s and the 139s.
Right. And so
well,
yeah, go ahead.
So those seem like low prices.
Right. You're right. There's no way when 2/3 of your market is pricing $25 at best below where the entire same comp set performed last year, that you're going to walk away with that same $173 ADR, because if they're selling anywhere from $100 to $150, they're going to be netting $70 to maybe $120, right? And so unless this really compresses and everyone shifts above last year, I can damn well guess there is almost no way this market is going to grow for this date.
Yeah.
And so I can look at this and pretty quickly see. And so if I'm looking at this whole week here, the first week of November in Baltimore, I can tell you there's almost no way that market is going to grow. And Baltimore has been a really rough market for a couple of years, and it continues to pile drive worse. So sometimes the market does really poorly, you expect it to kind of rebound its loss the next year. And Baltimore is on its almost 3rd year in a row of losses. And so when I'm comparing how it performed versus how the market's priced, I can pretty easily see there's almost no way these guys are going to really drive better business than last year. By contrast, here is the 28th, 29th, and 30th, which is the day we're in here this week we're going through right now. You can see everyone is priced above where they did last year. So last year, the comp set had a $114 ADR. We had a $90 ADR. And we are now all priced above that. So I would expect the market actually might be doing better because everyone's priced better than their performance last year. So this is a great way to see when you're comparing your star data or comparing how last year behaved for you, how relevant is that behavior? If you're trying to compete against yourself in pace, but the market is doing 20% worse than that, then the comparison of pace is a huge mistake when it comes to a strategic element of your strategy.
Yeah. Okay. I think I now know where I got lost for a moment.
Okay.
So I just want to Make sure I've got it right. So it's the little black lines are last year's, and so that's where you're getting last year's data. But the tall
That's the average. The average is all.
Yeah.
But yes,
that's the average of now. But the tall blue lines
the
are
average price. But the blue lines are last year. The blue bars.
So okay, sorry. So the reason I got confused is because I could see 2017 data at the bottom half of the screen.
Ah, yes, only top. I'm sorry.
I get it. Okay, you can get it all. All the information you need is in the top chart.
For this analogy until our next question, yes.
Yeah, got it. Okay, so forgive me. I got a D- in that.
That's okay. Yeah. Oh well, I'm in a good mood. And so then what you might want to say is, well, how on earth did they get there last year, right? Like the question sort of is, how relevant is pricing to the byproduct outputs? And so on the bottom, we're looking at last year's final output. So it's the same blue data, it just looks slightly different colors, but it's like the same mountain range, I call it. Isn't that nice? I live in Denver, so like, yeah. No, pretty soon I will also have a water bottle in my backpack like everyone else on the street. Just they don't even go hiking and they have water bottles everywhere. It's crazy.
Important these days.
Yeah, I'm telling you. Bunch of granolas. Anyways, but you can see how, and we didn't have all the same competitors in this case, but how all those same competitors that we do have priced last year. And so you can see down on the bottom, almost every single person priced at the peak or the peak of their ADR or above, right? And so if I'm comparing, let's just look at the back half of November and December, which is the significant start of your Christmas season, where really a lot of properties kind of disappear in value. So it looks like the 18th here, right, is the beginning of slow season for Baltimore, right? So Charlie, looking at this compared to how they were priced to get that mountain peak result last year versus how they're priced this year, is November and December different than what we saw, or is it still looking down year over year?
Oh man, I didn't expect this was going to be a quiz.
So you can be like, stop this shit, and we will. I promise. Yeah.
No, it's good. So against last year, I mean, they're kind of grouped around the average. I mean, the big difference is like red line. So your property last year was a real market leader, really picked up the average ADR, and that's not the case at the moment for the.
That's right. Drop and trowel, baby. Yep. No, so I mean, really, you see that in most cases, there's still probably 2/3 of the market is underneath or at the best ADR they delivered last year. Where last year there was maybe who's this orange guy, right? Wait for it. The Berkshire Suites in Harbor is given a deal last year, but almost everyone else was at or above. And so you could argue that this is like the whole market learning a lesson, saying we were way too inflated last year. We did not deliver good occupancies. You can see how poor the back end of December was. Yeah. And so in a lot of cases, this whole market has dropped to chase occupancy out early. And I would argue that unless oddly the market compresses and all these shift up in the last 20 or 30 days, we're looking at a market where now everyone is in the low flying sandbox.
Yeah, and it looks very clearly like the revenue manager for Red Lion Surprise has decided this December I'm going to chase occupancy. And
absolutely.
So maybe it's gone a little bit too far, given that they didn't. The reason they didn't have occupancy last time is they were significantly above the average, whereas now they're actually below the average.
Yep. And I can remove quickly the hotels that were not here last year if we wanted to see absolutely apples to apples.
Okay, I'm learning. I'm getting there. Okay, I'm getting a I understand your chart now. This is
right. But so the good thing, this is a fair statement, right? So sometimes this scares people for a minute, but the reality is, and it's easy for me because I invented these. Like I'm drinking my own Kool-Aid and loving it. But once you start saying this is what I want to answer, and so you kind of build it, all of a sudden, and then anyone else that you probably drag around with you, like your other 40 poor revenue managers at Red Lion, they struggle with it for a minute, but then immediately they're seeing this chart, and what they're looking for right off the bat is how am I priced and how is the market price compared to where they landed? So they're literally just watching the clouds on the top of the mountains here compared to where the rate clouds were last year on top of the mountains last year, right? And so now, if I gave you 10 more of these, Charlie, and let's just lie to me if you don't feel confident, but just say, like, you could quickly go, you could probably answer within a couple seconds, how is the market going to likely perform based on current pricing and what it actualized last year, all using historic data. And you would be I'm almost never wrong on this, because you can't get insane ADRs if no one's selling insane rates.
I totally with you, and I believe I could do that. And this is a perfect time to ask a question, which is, so the colors, this is not a very good webinar for people with color blindness, so I apologize.
Oh, it's not. I actually have had to create these for colorblind people, which is possible. It's just not as pretty.
Yeah. But the you have to be careful with those. But what does jump out at me is the question of all this information, and the nuance and the subtlety of like what's moving and where the things are at. It feels like something a computer should do better than my brain. What are the bits of this that you look at and you think, you know, we do this by hand. I didn't use this and not with a RMS. Like, where's the human?
So unfortunately, I mean, where we're at right now is kind of this fist bump between humans and machine, right? That we have machine that's decent at making decisions. We have machine that helps us see visually better and more efficiently. Unfortunately, no machine is really killing it on its own right now. And there's certainly, I mean, there just aren't, because there's too much to consider. And you can know, you've heard the phrase garbage in, garbage out. Most machines are not looking at, they're only looking at booking and rate shopping data, but they may not be looking at your demand 360 data. They may not be looking at the levers you're pulling in the OTA, so it doesn't understand why. So a machine right now, and every single machine is like this. Everybody knows that if you want to work your online travel agencies, you have to pull levers to drive business, right? Those levers are manual and they're done manually, right? And so the machine sees that and naturally is forced to think that that is a natural byproduct of market conditions. And so it prices accordingly, right? The reality is that is an external factor infusing a decision into it. And so it will look at that next year and cross-apply it for the next month or cross-apply for next year. And if you don't make that same manual intervention, the machine's going to be dead ass wrong. And so that's the problem right now, that we don't have everything integrated into RMSs, into media and marketing. And so that's really where we're at. And so it remains important to see everything that's going on that you're doing. And so it's use it kind of as a sidekick of automation, but not the main driver.
Got it. So like the perfect example of that is when you showed the earlier charts and it looked like your Expedia revenue this year was down.
Right.
And you're thinking as a human, okay, let me go onto Expedia and work out what I need to do to pull some levers off Expedia, whereas it would say overall demand is down.
Or it would say drop rate maybe. I mean, that's the only lever an RMS really has. And so that's the other question, right? Like, what can the RMS do for you? Well, it can change your pricing and yielding, and so some can't even change yielding, and so that's kind of it's limited to what it's limited to. Yeah.
Okay, well, no doubt they'll keep on improving, but there's still
it will absolutely will.
Still need humans.
No, and so the idea is to basically, I mean, a lot of times I came from a very evangelical background, so I get a little preachy, but like the land the plane message here a little bit is to scare everybody into going, oh my God, there are so many decisions to make in order to make the right decision, right? And so you need to know that it is going towards machines. It needs to go towards machines because there are hundreds of thousands of decisions that need to be made hour by hour, segment by segment, channel by channel. And you may have heard me talk about cost of distribution, incrementality indexing, channel, consumer buying behavior, products sold. And each one of those has several lenses that you need to make a straight through strategy with. And so there's no way a human can manage that all that well. So it has to get better. But right now, the answer is not to say it's too much, I just can't look at it, I'm going to kind of head in the sand. The answer is do a better job at seeing the full picture.
Right.
Because then, and then you'll appreciate when things come along, you know how to work with the lack in the machine or not.
Excellent. Right. Yeah. Well, thank you. I think I see our time is running out. We only have a few minutes, so if there are any questions, feel free to ask them in the webinar. But otherwise, I think were there any other key charts you want to show? We've kind of been through.
Yeah, the only last one that I kind of do like is this bubble pickup chart, which is sometimes put other things into it, but this is what true bookings are. They are, if you remember the 6 statuses, which I'll click down in the top right-hand corner: canceled, checked in, checked out, day canceled, no-showed, and reserved. They are, each bubble is a metric, and that's how data works, metrics and dimensions. Metrics are, I hope you like, I'm not trying to talk down to people when I say that, it's just simple. And so metrics are like a dollar amount, a room reserved, and a dimension is like the channel it comes through, the stay dates. It's like the like nouns and adjectives really is what they are. So descriptions of the metric. And so what we've got here is the reservation status is a dimension of, or a description of the metric, which is you do have a dollar somewhere, and the question is it canceled, is it reserved, is it checked in, is it checked out, did it no-show, is it a shortened reservation that got cut off? And so this is how reservations actually show up. So what we're looking at is stay date data. The bubbles are heighted and sized by ADR, so taller ADR and larger bubbles are more revenue. They're colored in this case by segment. I could do it by channel or by rate code. And above the line is onto my books, which is a liability I have to give the consumer in exchange. Their liability is cash back to me. And below the line, in the world of debits and credits, it is a liability on the consumer. Or I no longer have a liability on my books, but I also don't have anything in accounts receivable, essentially. And so what you have here is what's going on. So let's just take one day here. Let's take the 20th here. Green is my non-qualified rate, October 20th, and what booked for October 20th in the last 3 days of pickup that I've selected here is one room, and I can go right down to the reservation ID here, all at a $209 rate, all the way down to a $99 rate. And so if I were to look at my daily pickup, which is a pretty granular Excel report, I would say, gosh, I picked up or I sold, in this case, 7 or 8 rooms, and the average ADR maybe is 160, 170. But the reality is that's not even close to what you did. What you did do is you sold some rooms super high and some rooms at a third of that price down here at 99, on top of what you canceled between a $57 room to a 157. So what's happening here is we are generally selling more high dollar rooms. They're generally coming through our retail channel. Our cancellations, fortunately, are cheaper rates that I want to get rid of. But for some reason, this little nincompoop at $99 is getting in, when in the same day I'm selling rooms in the $200 range. And so what I might want to do is visually, quickly understand what is the range. So if I have high compression, I want to cut off all these little secret guys at the bottom that don't want to be going in there. And if I am looking at, the only way to see that in text is to go through a line by line data of reservations, or to jump in here and literally I sometimes will take like this and say, I don't want to sell any less than this these days. And I could literally say, I could highlight them and export them to a reservations analyst and say, what are these rate codes? Shut all these guys off now.
Yeah.
Right. And so again, the idea is, or sometimes we'll say, oh, Booking.com or Expedia isn't picking up anything. Well, no, they've just canceled and booked the same amount of rooms. And so you can see what I call like product churn as it's happening through this level. So this is really what raw data looks like visually. And I used to at the New York Hilton, I used to go through 75 pages of reservations every day and mark it up. Now I can do that for a hotel in 30 seconds and immediately know who my bad guys are and shut them off.
Yeah, that is really powerful. Very visual and very quick to see where things are going on. And a wonderful chart to finish on. Thank you. This has been fascinating, eye-opening insight into your world of data visualization. Out of interest, do you have many people, or have you worked with many people who they're not visual thinkers, and actually this isn't the best, this isn't a great format for them?
So I think that it's almost like a philosophical mindset that says that we're right brain, left brain. Some people prefer pictures, some people prefer data. And the reality, I don't really subscribe to that. I think that a picture is always worth 1,000 words because of how we see, and just like a video is worth 1,000 pictures, right? And so I really don't subscribe to that, and I could be wrong. But
and on that last one, you mentioned video. So if you're thinking ahead about what more you would like to be able to see in your charts, what would be the perfect next thing?
Yeah, I mean, video and 3D, right? So for example, for this chart, what I would like is to be able to hit play and just like a flip book of every booking date, I would like to see what this looks like for every booking date and see how the bubbles come in and where they cancel and maybe we give a huge wash from this group here. And then what happened was up here we sold a bunch of this at really low rate, but how it comes to be. And so then I know my full narrative of how a month comes to be. And then you could flip this moving forward because every day moves forward and you would see every booking that happens in your hotel for a full year. And then the other thing is you would want to see 3D because each one of these bookings, if there are 10 bookings at $55, it's difficult to show that in 2D. And so 3D, I would need to see depth of how many little bookings come in. And so I would say 3D video, augmented reality booking data would be what I would like.
You heard it here first. In a few years, you guys, everyone's gonna be wearing like goggles in the office.
That's right.
Around.
Yeah, exactly.
Data
yeah, there's an amazing video on the history of the world that the BV. I should give you the link, Charlie, if you ever want to post on the back of this. It's awesome. It gives you an idea of what it would look like to see this flipping through.
Right. Okay. We will post that in the webinar notes afterwards. Well, thank you so much. This has been really insightful and fabulous and fascinating. I'm sure that Tableau have appreciated their free adverts. Although I'm sure there are also no doubt many
other good visualizers too. Yep.
Yep. Yeah. But it's a great one. I think you said one of your tips at the Direct Booking Summit was that actually you can sign up for an individual user account on Tableau and just start getting to use it and see how you
Most of them have like a free license for 30 days if you're a student. They usually do a free year. And then I'm telling you, this will make you so much more efficient. You should invest in yourself, go on one less vacation, buy a license for this yourself personally. It is like playing with an iPhone to start playing with, right? And you will learn so much about your data as you're playing with it. Don't be intimidated by this. You really shouldn't. It's actually way easier to put together than you think. There's tons of YouTube trainings on it.
That is a wonderful, wonderful point on which to finish it. So Calvin, thank you so much for your time and for showing us through all this fabulous insights. And I look forward to our future world of virtual revenue management.
Exactly. Yeah. Sounds good. All right.
Thank you all very much.
Share.
Bye.